Hello everyone, welcome back to the new news. My name is Paul and I hope that you all are having a great day. Obviously, we got a lot of stuff that's currently going on in the world. A lot of stuff's happening in Ukraine. There's quite a bit of news that's come out around Ukraine and the ongoing situations geopolitically as well. There's been a rather very big thing that happened today too, and that has to deal with the humanitarian rights investigations ongoing in Ukraine. And so, obviously, if you read the title, you kind of understand what that is. But that's actually going to come into the international news, which is a little bit different for the day. But there's just a ton of stuff. A lot of people are being affected. There's not a whole lot of good things happening. A lot of natural disasters. A lot of global famine, drought, war. We got all sorts of floods. We have all sorts of stuff going on, and what that is, and so that's causing an immense amount of pretty terrible things happening to people globally. But luckily, you guys have built an awesome community and we can help. So if you guys want to go ahead and take a look at the video description, you guys can see that we're actually able to help by just raising money for these foundations. Humanitarian aid is struggling. Ongoing currently, the war in Ukraine has caused an immense amount of people to have their rations cut because a lot of that had to be emergency diverted. And unfortunately, with the lack of grain export to the global market from Ukraine due to the war, that means a lot of that grain can't be used for humanitarian aid. Now, please do check out the video description below. Check out, we vetted all of those organizations to make sure that they are good. 80% or more of the proceeds actually go to what they're supposed to be going to, the programs, helping people, helping the war effort. So please make sure to take a look at them, make sure that to give them your support. And I appreciate the support that you have given us. So if you can't give a lot to these organizations, though, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, I understand. Give us a like and subscribe. Tell your friends about us. The more people that come here and enjoy the news the way that, can come enjoy the news the way we do it. But also, more importantly, the more people that will be here to help us, raise more money and help people. We're never going to be doing super chats on this channel. We're never going to be doing any kind of pushing merch or anything like that. That's not what we're here for. We're just here to help people globally. And that's the whole point of the project. So once again, I thank you guys for your support already and your continual support for those organizations, and just keep that up. So with that, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and dive into the news ongoing in Ukraine, which is our special report. So we have a couple of different developments here. First one's actually going to be here in Kyiv, where we're hearing, at least from Kirilo Budanov, who's Ukraine's chief of defense intelligence, that a significant number of the Azovstal defenders may be released from captivity soon. So that would be a pretty big development, considering a lot of them have been sent to Moscow at this point. But he said that they could be released here from Russian activity in the near future. The likelihood is that if the ones that will likely be released first would be those that are Ukrainian Marines and not part of the Azov regiment, which really spearheaded a lot of that towards the end. So just keep a lookout for this. This is kind of a heads up. We don't know if and when this would happen. There's some kind of conflicting reports with this, but the possibility of it even happening is something to be a little bit happy about. So hopefully this does occur, that they are released from captivity. We can kind of see what happened, and hear about what happened afterwards, and kind of, because realistically, they're the only ones that know, because everyone else is in occupied territory. So if they come out and are released, they would be the ones to know what happened in Mariupol and really be able to give some in-depth, understanding as to how this battle took place, what happened during the battle, all of that. So pretty significant. And as we jump up here, we have a little bit of good news here as well, and that's the fact that Patron is getting some new high-tech toys. So his Patron and his handlers. Patron is this little adorable bomb-sniffing dog. He's just absolutely tiny. He's super tiny. He's super adorable. He attends meetings. He's been awarded medals. He's getting a stamp after him. He basically has a cult following of people that will chant his name anytime they see him. He is a bomb-sniffing dog, but his team was given a mini submersible. That means that they can go in the water. A lot of these waters are just littered with unexploded ordnance. So they have a small submersible now, as well as a new pretty high-tech quadcopter that they're going to be able to use. It's more tools, so that way they can locate and identify these pieces of unexploded ordnance without putting people at risk. So it's going to substantially help their demining operations up there. And there he is, sitting on top of his ROV there. Absolutely adorable. He has a carrying handle. You can literally carry this dog around like a suitcase. He is so adorable. He's the ultimate good boy. The ultimate good pupper. Absolutely 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10 would recommend joining the cult of Patron. We have cookies. Anyway, as we jump down over here into the Kharkiv Oblast, things do start getting, as you can tell by the dots, relatively they start going south. And not just literally, but figuratively as well. And that is because there's more shelling of innocent Ukrainian villages. We're seeing this pretty consistently on the part of the Russians. And we have a couple of statements here. So, due to the Russian shelling in Chuihiv and the Kharkiv region on June 21st, a private house was hit, 3 people were injured. And that's coming from the press service of the Kharkiv Regional Military Administration. And then also today, due to Russian shelling in Chuihiv in the Kharkiv region on June 22nd, the bodies of 2 dead women were found under the rubble of a destroyed boiler house. And that's coming from the main director of the State Emergency Service of Ukraine in the Kharkiv region. So, Chuihiv is a little bit larger of a city, but what is the point? That's the big ask, right? Like, what is the point? Like, okay, if you're gonna hit something, you're gonna hit this, right? You're gonna hit the airport. That's a really big target to miss. How are you landing rounds in the town purposefully? You know what I mean? Like, it's, you know how far off you have to be. And I get artillery, like all it takes is a little minor thing. Like you have to be detailed when you're doing these things, but that's such a big target. Like, anybody that knows anything about artillery should be able to just generally put rounds here with any kind of just minimal training on those kind of weapon systems. They should be able to put rounds here. Maybe not on the buildings, but here. Not here. Here. And that's the really just mind-blowing part of it, right? Now, with it being an airport there, probably being used, it's been liberated, it's probably being used by Ukrainian troops. There is a military objective to that. Unfortunately, I don't think this may have been purposeful. It very well could have been, but I don't think this one is probably actually purposeful to do this. It just happens to be a tragedy, but that's the unfortunate part of war. Not everything is purposeful, but nothing is any less of a tragedy. But we do get a little bit of good news here in between, and that's because here in Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, the UN aid has arrived. They haven't been able to reach this area at this point. The security situation has allowed for it, at least momentarily. So the UN was able to reach at least these 2 frontline cities that are pretty heavily battered by the Russian artillery. But a lot of these people in these regions, there is no running water, there is no plumbing, there is no, so, which is basically the same thing, but there's no real sanitation at this point because everything's been destroyed in that way. There's no electricity. Your food supplies, your logistics are all screwed up. Bridges have been bombed and destroyed. Your rail lines have been upturned and destroyed. Your houses, your grocery stores, a lot of the humanitarian aid stations that they had in the town that was being supplied by other NGOs were just, destroyed or shelled along with the rest of the cities. So life is very difficult. There's not a whole lot of necessities, bare basic human necessities, and so the UN reaching this is pretty good. It means that's going to at least temporarily relieve some of those issues with food and water insecurities at the very least. So here it is. This is the official UN convoy arriving with their humanitarian aid. So pretty great to hear. And we move over here into the Luhansk region. And the Luhansk region is seeing the most bitter fighting thus far along the Donbass offensive. And so the first thing we see here is actually here in Lysychansk, where, according to Sergei Haida, who's the head of the Luhansk Regional Military Administration, quote, due to Russian shelling in Lysychansk in the Luhansk region on June 21st, the buildings of the police, the prosecutor's office, the security service of Ukraine were damaged. There are at least 3 wounded civilians. Several police officers were also injured. So they're still targeting Lysychansk. Lysychansk's under a pretty substantial bombardment, pretty much continuously at this point. And that's what you're seeing now that the Battle of Severodonetsk is the majority of Severodonetsk, from our understanding, is under Russian control. Lysychansk is under pressure by Russian forces. What you see, this would be a shifting of their fires. You don't need to bombard Severodonetsk as heavily, not that they really needed to begin with, but in the eyes of Russia, in a Russian battlefield commander, we need to shift our fires so we don't hit our own forces with our own artillery. So instead of focusing that artillery on Severodonetsk, they have shifted that now onto Lysychansk, and that is pretty much indiscriminate. There's no other way to describe it. It is just saturate, just put rockets and shells and mortar rounds all over the damn city. Just level the city. You don't have to clear a city if it's not there anymore. And that is kind of what they're doing right now. And we see that day in, day out, hour by hour, every single day thus far. So that's kind of the situation here. It is causing pretty substantial civilian casualties. There is no, once again, just like the rest of the Luhansk region, there are no necessities for civilians, and they're also stuck in the middle of bomb shelters because to go outside literally could mean life and death. So that's the situation there in Lysychansk. But Severodonetsk is a little bit more uplifting here. We're still seeing the Ukrainian forces, they're still fighting rather fiercely, even in places such as the encircled Azot plant. There are still civilians within the Azot plant. I believe it reported 568, most of which are the employees of the facility as well as their families. But there are significant amounts of Ukrainian troops still in and around the plant and fighting off Russian forces. We also see them fighting in other parts of the city which haven't been captured at this point as well. And we actually have some of that footage for you here today. Now, why are you doing this in an active combat zone? I don't encourage this. This is dumb. But it gives at least us at home some understanding, or at least a minimal, I should say, understanding what's happening. If you are in an active war zone, stop recording yourself. Stop. Just stop. First of all, it gives enemy forces, if you're killed or captured, valuable intel. Stop doing it. Secondly, you're in an active war zone. Pay attention to what the hell is going on and stop putting yourself in danger just to do it for the gram. Like, you don't have to do it. You're putting your life at risk. That That split second he stopped to pick up his phone, he just fired an RPG. Everyone in the block is going to know where he's at. And obviously he just shot at somebody, so the Russians are close enough for him to shoot at him. Right? Like, everyone and their mother knows where he's at. What's the number one thing Russians like to do? Call artillery in on your position. GTFO, don't waste a second to go pick up your phone. Just get out. Not worth it. It's just not worth it. This is how people die. Seconds mean everything. And so, obviously, we can see the usage of a tank here. It is a T-64 as far as I can tell based on the road wheels, but I could be wrong. But that is the situation there in Severodonetsk. Rather pretty heavy fighting on all sides right now. The Azov plant is effectively surrounded. It's just the Azovstal Part 2. Really, Severodonetsk can be just described as a Mariupol Part 2. The battle has quickened at least a little bit. It's not nearly as bad as it was in Mariupol with the complete besiegement and then months of fighting. It's just been weeks. Now, that could quickly change, but, you know, would you rather it slow or fast is kind of not the question you should be asking yourself. It probably just shouldn't have happened to begin with. We jump down here, and this really, every day we show this pretty much. It's a massive amount of equipment that is flowing, through Ukraine, on either our Ukrainian side or by the Russians. And really, what you have to understand is this is indeed the largest land war in Europe since World War II. Both sides, I could not find any of the identifiers that normally mark Russian invasion vehicles on these. So it could be Ukrainian, it could be Russian, I just don't know. But this is the largest land war in Europe in 80 plus years, since the end of World War II. And the amount of destruction, I mean, everyone was aghast when World War I happened because warfare had changed. It was the war to end all wars, the Great War. And then World War II came by and, blew that out of the water about 20 times over. When it came to the amount of death and destruction. And now this one, and that was just a 20, 30 year gap there between those two wars. I mean, now this is the, this has been 80 years of advanced weapons development of, everyone has a cell phone, everyone has a drone, everyone has, precision weapons munitions, even though the Russians have pretty much run out. Everyone, everyone's got friends. The world's more globally interconnected economically and militarily. There's so many more things than the World War II that make this so... You human beings... the best I've ever heard it described is there's only one thing that trumps human beings. That human beings are really good at killing each other, essentially. Human beings are... like that we're the greatest thing at killing each other, but there's only one thing we do better, and that's apparently build bridges because they're not meant to fall down. So we're extremely good at killing each other, and it's just unbelievable how much equipment is being brought into this conflict for that singular purpose. So let's just take a look. So this is just one vehicle or a couple vehicles that are passing each other. So they're constantly on the move. Units are constantly on the move. But we're seeing entire, this isn't like tank platoons or tank companies. These are tank battalions and regiments, like huge numbers of armor that are moving into combat. I think these are Russian, now that I take a look at it a little bit closer, because I think I could see the V on the back of this one, and these guys would be killing each other if that wasn't the case. But also these are T-80s that are rolling in there based on the snorkeling gear. And also another identifier of the T-80, mustache. the very distinct mustache. But anyway, yeah, it's just an immense amount of people. I mean, immense amount of equipment, and we see this again as we come down here. This is over by Kadivka, which is behind Russian lines at this point, and they're literally the best way to describe it is the Russian horde. There is no other way. There is just an immense amount of troops and equipment. None of them may be very well equipped. Like, no Russian soldiers like rocking the brand new stuff right now. Like, and no one's got, the best scopes or anything. Like, they're all rocking iron sights and stuff from the 60s for body armor. But, I mean, there's just a lot of them. In the unconfirmed words of Joseph Stalin, a quantity has a quality all of its own. And you really see that as the fallback here. Because now that this war is turning into prolonged, Russia's gone from doing this the quick and easy way of we topple a government in 72 hours, obviously, like the U.S. did to every dictator in the Middle East. But we see that quickly change to absolute just nothing but brute force trying to bust down the door. And it's insane how much they're throwing into this conflict. I mean, it's almost 2 minutes. We've watched 1 minute and 15 of this. This is 2 minutes of this guy, and he's not exactly going all that slow either. Like, he's zipping around these things, and that's just a ton of stuff. I mean, that is a ton of equipment, and I've seen tons of equipment before. Don't get me wrong. So this isn't like the biggest group of equipment I've ever seen or anything, but I mean, when you're talking about mobilizing forces and losses of manpower and stuff, this is basically like what, a BTG's worth of stuff going to the front lines, realistically, like a BTG probably augmented. And they're losing that many troops a day. Sometimes more. I mean, these guys, their first time in combat, are likely going to be rendered completely combat ineffective due to losses. That is an immense, and that is happening every single day. It's insane. How do you do this? How do you maintain this kind of a war effort? Because these guys take time and money to train. These guys, especially if they're in like a specialized role, tank commanders, these guys require to go to college if you're an officer. Like, an immense amount of time and energy spent into these troops that are just thrown into a meat grinder, and equipment. Millions and millions and millions of dollars put into equipment. I mean, stockpiles that took decades to maintain and to get during the arms races, during this fall, during the Soviet Union, and the millions of dollars worth of stuff that is spent since then for just upgrading a partial part of your force to something that could, be somewhat effective in the 21st century, just wasted and destroyed almost instantly upon reaching the front lines. That is unfathomable in its scale. Absolutely unfathomable in its scale. Like, it has been. I mean, the last time you could equivalent a war this large would be the invasion of Iraq, but the invasion of Iraq didn't take this long, and that's the crazy part. As we move over here, this is over at Chasiv Yar, and this is over by Bakhmut. Bakhmut's just to the east of this. And Russian forces, as they continue to encroach, I think we're going to start to see, Chasiv Yar and many other locations being hit more substantially. Because as Russian forces continue to encroach on Bakhmut, slowly but surely, we are going to see them start to shift those fires, similar to how we see them shift from Severodonetsk to Lysychansk. So, this is according to Pavlo Krylenko, who is the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. They stated, quote, due to the Russian shelling at Chasiv Yar in the Bakhmut district of the Donetsk region on June 21st, 1 person was killed and 11 were injured, including 6 children. Russian aggressors used cluster shells banned by international conventions. And that's something we'll actually get to here in a little bit regarding that. But just a massive amount of just destruction of cities. I mean, there are entire villages that, it would take us a lot of time. I'm pretty sure, let's see here, if we can find a village. Yeah, like this one, Harovske, is probably no longer on the map. It's probably just gone. And that's the thing. Like, so many locations we hear about, but how many villages that are just, kind of in, kind of their own little communes in the fields or whatever, are just gone. They're just wiped off the earth. How many just unnamed, unincorporated places are just gone? They just don't exist anymore. It's, we talk a lot, even here on the channel, about, like, Mariupol just being wiped off the map. But Mariupol's a really big city. It took a long time to wipe it off the map. There are entire villages getting wiped off the map just every day. Just every day. A village is just poof, gone. It's just, like I said, we've gotten scarily good at killing each other. And as we move over here into the eastern part of Ukraine, and pretty deep behind Ukrainian lines, in fact, or Russian lines, in fact, this is I'm going to try and pronounce this, Novoshatinsk. So there was an oil refinery here, and Ukraine did end up hitting it with a drone, and we actually have the footage of this. So let's take a look.
Да, это беспилотник. Да блин, где ты там? Не украинский? Да нет, конечно. Не вижу. Не вижу. Ебать! Блядь! Охуеть! Завод взрывается тут! Охуеть! Такие дела, чуваки, блин. Такие дела. НПЗшку бахнули.
Украины, да, прилетел?
Ну да, с той стороны прилетел.
Что, работу останавливаем, нет?
So yeah, that's a pretty deep strike behind the lines. I mean, you don't see that very often, but that's a pretty impressive strike. So, but pretty insane. So it looks like actually this is just across the border. So, we plop down here over into Mariupol. And we actually get an announcement this time from the mayor, not the advisor to the mayor. And this is from Vadim Boychenko, who is the mayor of Mariupol. And he stated that since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, Russian aggressors have killed more than 22,000 Ukrainian citizens in Mariupol. Conservative estimates, real numbers are likely higher. It's a massive amount of people. Massive amount of people. That's... Like, where I live, that would be, like, half the people in my city just gone. If not more. Because that's the conservative estimates. That's the low end, is what he's saying. That's the safe to say 22,000 people are gone. And we won't know unless Mariupol is liberated by Ukrainian troops. And we can actually see the full level of the destruction that happened there. we've been able to gauge it pretty well, but that's just an insane amount of loss of life. Most people's most people's towns don't have 22,000 people to lose. But Ukraine did get a new trophy here along the Donbass front, and that's because they managed to capture a Russian BMP-4. Now, the BMP-4 is the newest model of the BMP that Russia has released. It is the most upgraded version, a modernized version, and luckily for us, these guys actually gave us a tour of what that's actually like, and I'm not impressed to tell you that, folks.
Ну що це на загорській тут? Французький пластина БМД 4 от. Ну, повненька. Радіоуправляємі заряди. От такі в нас. Хопа. Повна. О, шлем.
Not impressed. No, I'm not saying in the field it doesn't get real dirty in there, because it certainly does. It does, but I mean, I'm not impressed with the outlay with this. This is literally, they took a BMP-1, took the turret off, and dropped a new turret in there, essentially. I mean, it's just not, for being one of the most modernized things that the Russians have. Russians rely a lot more on analog because technology fails. Nothing wrong with that, but I mean, what they got is just antiquated. Like, even their new stuff is just antiquated. The T-90s, the upgraded T-90s, antiquated. They just are. They're not very good. And they can't withstand, modern weaponry. They just can't. Their T-14, with their most modern tank, main battle tank, that's super secretive and no one really knows anything about, except for the fact that there's so few of them that Russia is not even willing to put them in the field. And not only that, but they are so lackluster in their capabilities that they just can't, they're not very good. They're not very good vehicles. They're not very good main battle tanks. They're not reliable. Their engines fail. They're unproven, untested. And they have a variety of maintenance issues that Russia logistically just can't support in the field. And it's questionable even if they would operate effectively without being just completely eradicated. Over here in Tokmak, unfortunately, Russia has also completely dismantled the entirety of Ukraine's largest solar energy farm, removing 237 acres worth of solar panels. So, pretty massive area. I mean, this is 96 hectares of land. Massive, massive solar farm. And they just dismantled it and shipped it back to Russia. And this is what you see all over the place. I mean, you just see them just, even if it's nailed down, they take it. It's insane. I mean, we've seen just little girls' blankets and stuff just on tanks, just because it's ours now. Like, one, that's a war crime. That's called pillaging. There are things that allow you to take. There are things within the Geneva Convention that allow you to steal goods for the good of your war effort. Resale is not part of that, and just taking personal property, because personal property is separate from other property, is also not okay. There's a distinction. And as we go over here to En Hadar, we see that the power plant workers at Ukraine's largest, this is Ukraine's largest nuclear power plant, and they have gone missing, according to the mayor of En Hadar, the Ukrainian mayor of En Hadar. They are just missing. So he said that they're being abducted en masse by Russian occupiers. Whereabouts of some unknown. The rest are in very difficult conditions. They are being tortured with electric shock, bullied physically and morally. And that's coming from the Euromaidan press. It seems that we may have some partisan work here. Explosions actually rocked the small port city of Skodovsk, which is in the Kherson Oblast, right here along the coastline, just to the northeastern part of the Black Sea. And yeah, there's several explosions that rocked the port there. It's not a whole lot known regarding, if it was like a Ukrainian strike via drone or if it was partisans, but there's just a lack of information. But we have seen partisan work rather heavily, including possibly sabotaging other types of docks, including the one at Berdyansk. So very possible this is also another bit of partisan work here. We know the partisans are very active, especially in the Kherson Oblast. So let's take a look. So, nice little short video there. Oh. Accidentally opened a new tab instead of closing the last one.
Порт горит. 2 ракеты прилетело.
Whatever it is, it's pretty big. So, but that is yet another port. Regardless of what the cause is, that means that this is another port here off the Black Sea that just is not capable of being used. While they still may have Mariupol, demining operations are still ongoing with that. Berdyansk currently has been hit several times now, and you're really limited on your options here as to what you can and can't use at this point. Mykolaiv has a couple of different things ongoing here. The first one is that one person is dead and 6 are injured. As a result of Russian shelling. Due to Russian shell, this is coming from the press service of the Mykolaiv Military Administration. Quote, due to the Russian shelling in the Mykolaiv region on June 21st, 1 person was killed and 6 were injured. Residential buildings, buildings of local enterprises, and social infrastructure were destroyed. And this is coming from Alexander Sankovich, the mayor of Mykolaiv. Quote, rocket attacks on Mykolaiv on June 22nd. 3 people were injured. 5 apartment buildings, a building of local school, and the infrastructure of 2 private enterprises were damaged. That's not the only thing that was hit. Obviously, one of those enterprises that were hit was actually there's no oil untouched when it comes to Russia, because this is a vegetable oil plant here in Mykolaiv. We actually got it geolocated here. We can zoom in. So this is an olive oil plant. By the way, it's right next to an animal hospital. Nice. So the Russian forces hit this. It started a pretty large fire. We don't know of the casualties, though, but let's take a look.
Да, пожалуй, поедем.
So you actually can see the strike itself over here. So pretty massive hit. Now I don't know what the purpose of hitting a vegetable oil plant is. I don't know. Maybe they just don't like fried food. Whatever their problem is, they probably don't need to be launching cruise missiles into a vegetable oil plant. But it may be in retaliation for this, which is because for about at least 48 hours at this point, oil rigs still appear to be on fire off the coast of Ukraine, as at least visible from Odessa. This is really the only thing we can think of that would be causing this big of a fire. These oil rigs were reportedly unable to be recovered or salvageable, and they basically suspended all operations to try and put out the fire at this point, at least according to our sources. We cannot confirm that, but reportedly these oil platforms were actually being used as radar stations by the Russian military over here. So that's the reason for Ukraine hitting them. We can take a look. I mean, this is for off the coast of Odessa, and that's a pretty roasty fire, whatever that is, because that's the only thing that could be. Is off the coast. I mean, that's in the Black Sea. This is off the coast of Odessa. There's nothing out there except for warships and stolen grain, essentially. And neither of which I do not believe is on fire. Ukraine nor anyone else has talked about another ship being hit at this point. So that leads us to believe this large of a fire lighting up that sky is going to be those oil fires that are burning from these platforms. But that actually is it for inside of Ukraine. But we have plenty of other stuff outside of Ukraine. I think we actually hit on one thing. It was in the Luhansk region, but so it be sometimes. As we jump over here, we're actually going to start off here in Moscow because we have a lot of stuff coming out of Russia, and there's a lot of Russian-related stuff going on throughout the world. And no military targets in Donetsk. So this is the Russian embassy in the United States. I put it here in Moscow because literally all they do is reiterate what Moscow says. Seriously, if you look at all of their... I'm probably on a watch list because I follow pretty much every organization on social media when it comes to the Russians. And... or at least all their government organizations, and they just say the same thing almost verbatim. But Russia has called for the shelling of Donetsk to cease, stating that there are no military targets within the city, many of which we've aired on this stream. How many times have I said, "Oh look, it's another ammo depot blown up in the city of Donetsk"? Oh look, in fact, just the other day when they hit the plant there, and a bunch of Russian trucks, after they got bombarded with 155 shells, started rolling out from the plant in the city of Donetsk, right down the street where civilians were videotaping them. Now, are all these shells landing on target? No. In fact, there are several times where we have shown where they haven't been. But if you don't put military targets in highly civilian populations, we'll get to that in a moment, but take a look at this. We called on the U.S. to acknowledge the ongoing shelling of Donetsk residential areas by Ukrainian radicals. Every day, completely innocent people die. There are no military installations and places of deployment of Russian troops there. Isn't this a monstrous war crime? It would be if you didn't put your ammunition depots in the downtown city of Donetsk. Like that's the key, right? There are no installations and places of deployment of Russian troops there. That's not true. We've shown it here repeatedly. Please, go back and watch pretty much any stream prior to this. Pretty much any stream. There is some kind of shelling hitting military infrastructure of the Russians or the DNR inside of the occupied city of Donetsk. Almost every single day. We have aired it. So this is a blatant, flat-out lie. In fact, on our Discord, we actually aired one of an ammunition depot that was hit and going off. I've seen people use this saying that I've seen Russian sources use this and say that that Ukrainian shelled residential area. We geolocated it to an ammunition depot there. So I don't know what to tell you other than that's just an absolute flat out lie. That isn't true. We've shown it here. And if there wasn't a reasonable, if it wasn't without reasonable doubt that it was untrue, we probably wouldn't be showing it here. And, of course, as a little poke at the fact that basically every single street that Russia has a embassy on worldwide has been essentially renamed to something like Zelensky Boulevard or something. The Russians renamed the square next to the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. It's been renamed to the Donetsk People's Republic Square. And here's the official document for it. And as we talked about yesterday, we talked about how Russia is using their reserves that they have saved, right, in their banks to manipulate the ruble to where it is it's been the strongest it has ever been in 7 years, despite having an over 15% inflation rate, which is extremely high for a currency. That actually makes it that being at a 7-year high actually makes the ruble the most resilient currency in the world, which is untrue. It's market manipulation, essentially. They're manipulating how their currency works. It's manipulation of the economic situation inside of the country. And we said, like, and when we went over this, and I said, Russia can do this for a limited time. They purposely built those reserves so they could, because they knew if they did anything they would become sanctioned. But that is bought time, and Russia cannot maintain to do that, because if they tried to, the worth of the ruble, especially with the inflation, once the reserves run out, they can't manipulate anymore, and their entire economy and any stability, false stability or real stability that the ruble may have, would instantly essentially collapse. And then there goes the entire Russian economy. Now, obviously the Russians thought of this too. They're not stupid people. They may be crazy. Like, the government may be absolutely crazy in Russia, but they aren't stupid. I won't give them that. And according to Putin, the possibility of switching reserves over to currencies of other nations within the BRIC economic bloc is possible, and is currently going through ongoing discussions inside of Russia. And this is actually coming from TASS News, which is a state-run news media agency. So, yep. So he said he was welcome to address, and he said the issue of creating an international reserve currency based on the currencies of BRICS member states is under consideration. So, AKA, we have limited time. We need to switch to something else so that way we can buy more time. And so that kind of proves the point that I was trying to hit yesterday. Some other news agencies, says the New York Times, it was saying, "Wow, it's so astonishing, that the ruble can do this. The sanctions aren't working. Sanctions are working. Russia's putting a face on it." To say they're not, because they keep saying it's not, and if they can prove that the ruble is withstanding, in some way, shape, or form, that means it's not. But it would if the ruble was withstanding without manipulating the market and the currency, and the economics of your own country. If you weren't manipulating those things, the ruble would be absolutely, like, the ruble would not be worth the paper it's printed on. It wouldn't. You would be better off selling your coinage for scrap than what the ruble would be worth in Russia. So that's pretty much where it would be at economically, and they've manipulated it to where, with the reserves that they saved up for years, to be able to do this. So that's kind of why at this point it's pretty possible that is already starting to falter, and they know it is. They need to switch. And they've also been accusing, as we hit on yesterday, Kaliningrad. So Vilnius, which is Lithuania, has cut off Russia's ability to move stuff via rail. And I kind of misspoke entirely on that, because I said they cut it all off. That's not true. And amongst the tensions, the actual prime minister of Lithuania has publicly addressed this. So this is the official Lithuanian government Twitter, and this is the prime minister, and she just makes it really simple, bullet point manner addressing this stuff. So even when we got it wrong, I want to make that correction now. So let's go ahead and take a look.
First, any talk of a blockade of Kaliningrad is a lie. Second, Lithuania is complying with the sanctions imposed by the European Union on Russia for its aggression and war against Ukraine. Third, after a 3-month transitional period, the EU sanctions on steel and ferrous metals transported through the territory of the EU entered into force last weekend. Fourth, the sanctions were agreed by all the EU member states on March 15th. Fifth, steel and ferrous metal products account for only around 1% of the total rail freight to Kaliningrad via Lithuania. Sixth, all the other goods necessary for people living in Kaliningrad Oblast, food, pharmaceuticals, etc., are being transported. Passenger transit is also taking place under a special arrangement by the EU, Russia, and Lithuania.
Not gonna mince words, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is what's being said. This is what happened. This is what is current, or this is what happened to cause this. This is what and this is what's happening now. Just write down the bullet point list. There's no political speech in that. This is what's happening. Like that's pretty, and that's coming straight from the Prime Minister of Lithuania. So, so that's pretty, considering what Russia is saying, they're blockading, the people in Kaliningrad are going to starve because of the Lithuanian blockade. No, actually, we're just not going to transport steel. Like, you can't send steel through here, or iron, or literally any other, like, ferrous metals. The stuff we sanctioned 3 months ago. Jump down here to Vienna, here in Austria. And we see that of course, Russia, as we've seen before here in Vienna, likes to use historical comparisons. And luckily for them today, they got to use the historical comparison of the beginning of Operation Barbarossa. Operation Barbarossa actually began today, I believe 80 plus years ago. And that marked the beginning of Nazi Germany's invasion of Russia. And into Russian-held territories. Because remember that prior to Operation Barbarossa in 1939, so the Soviet Union under Joseph Stalin and Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler created a pact, I would say. It is not, I wouldn't say that it was an alliance. It was kind of like an alliance. Basically, we're going to invade Poland together and I won't attack you if you don't attack me, kind of thing. Neither of them trusted each other. Keep that in mind. But Russia and Nazi Germany did start World War II together, which many people forget that because the Soviet Union invaded Poland from the east and Nazi Germany invaded Poland from the west. And together they split the country. In fact, the really big contention between the two of them during the invasion was the fact that Germany, being Germany, overran their designated, agreed-upon stopping points and into Soviet-controlled territory during the outset of the war and tried to take more land at that time. So people forget about that. But, of course, they aren't going to talk about the fact that they started World War II. Today's the day that the Operation Barbarossa began against them. So they're going to use this to compare the beginning of Operation Barbarossa in 1941 to Germany's decision to send self-propelled guns to Ukraine. Because, of course, June 22nd, 1941, Nazi Germany-led horde attacked USSR. 81 years later, the West claims world dominance once again declared Russia its enemy, a proxy war using Ukraine's neo-Nazis and radicals waged against Russians since 2014. We have a good long memory. Mission will be accomplished. You started World War II together, buds. I think you forgot that one. But don't worry, it's because they don't remember World War II. Remember, that was one of the State Duma's complaints, is the fact that World War II is being taught in Ukraine and not the Great Patriotic War of the Soviet Union. Remember that, because we did air that. We did air that quote from the State Duma. We did do that. So remember, that's all they care about. They do not care about what happened before that. 1939 never happened in the Soviet Union, okay? It is what Stalin said happened. And this actually kind of funnily leads us into the next point in Vienna. And this is the big topic of the night. This is what I named this after because this is very, very big news. There has been ongoing international investigations inside of Ukraine regarding humanitarian, breaches of international humanitarian law, war crimes, crimes against humanity. And the first group to release a report is the OSCE. So the OSCE is a European organization. Russia has a delegation to the OSCE. In fact, the way that this was conducted was not only under, I believe it was the Vienna Accords, but also under the Moscow mechanism, which was agreed upon in Russia, in Moscow, amongst all OSCE members to include Russia as to how to conduct investigations in this manner. So this was all done by the book. And the OSCE, so it's available in Ukrainian, Russian, and English for anyone who is interested. And this was regarding their findings in the investigation from what they could conduct inside of Ukraine at this point in time. This really only covers from the beginning of the war through about mid to late March, realistically, or early April. So they have a time limit that they have to do this in. It's about 3 weeks, and they'll talk about that here as well. But it's a pretty long document. We're not going to go through all of it. But I did pull a quote from some of the very first beginning paragraphs, and I want to read this off. So, while it has not been able to verify all reported incidents that involve violations of international humanitarian rights law, or IHRL, it has found credible evidence suggesting that such violations concerning even the most fundamental human rights, rights to life, prohibition of torture and other inhumane and degrading treatment and punishment, have been committed, mostly in the areas under the effective control of Russia or entities under overall control of Russia. The mission has also concluded that the impact of the conflict on the enjoyment of human rights has gone beyond the direct violation of these rights. By causing a high level of destruction and interfering with the provision of vital services, education, and healthcare, the conflict started by the unlawful attack by Russia has made it very difficult for Ukraine to effectively respect, protect, protect, and fulfill the human rights of its inhabitants. Furthermore, the mission has found that while the conflict has affected all the inhabitants of Ukraine, it has exerted and continues to exert particularly negative effects on individuals belonging to vulnerable groups, such as women, children, older persons, and the persons with disabilities. The mission is not able to conclude whether the Russian attack on Ukraine per se may qualify as a widespread systematic attack directed against the civilian population. It, however, holds that some patterns of violent acts violating international humanitarian rights law, which have been repeatedly documented in the course of the conflict, such as the targeted killing, enforced disappearance or abduction of civilians, and including journalists and local officials, are likely to meet this qualification. Any single violent act of this type committed as part of such an attack with the knowledge of it would then constitute a crime against humanity. So while this does damn Russia pretty heavily throughout the entire thing, and I've read the majority of it, I did not read the entirety. I will say that much. I did not have time prior to the stream to read it in its entirety. But it's very damning, and it goes through very, very thoroughly on how this is. But it also covers war crimes that have been perpetrated by Ukraine as well, not just Russia. And like I said, it's very important to remember that Russia isn't the only one conducting war crimes. Russia's the only one that could arguably be conducting these on a very large, systematic scale, which isn't able to be confirmed at this point by the OSCE, considering they had 3 weeks. But it is something that they consider something to be likely, considering the evidence that they have put forth, that it is very possible. And that's very different from Ukrainians committing war crimes where they're, executing prisoners or whatever in small groups because they're frustrated and angry, and, they just, the Russian troops just got done murdering their children and whatever else. But this is the official OSCE report. So we can take a look here. So this is from the OSCE. This is the English version of the report because I can't read any Slavic language. I only read English, guys. I'm sorry. But it's invoked by all 45 OSCE participating states following bilateral consultations with Ukraine. And they do make it very obvious that these have been conducted in accordance with paragraph 7 of the 1991 Moscow document, also known as the Moscow Mechanism. So this is all conducted properly as it can get, considering they had 3 weeks. So that is the situation. So actually, I'll read here. So this is the executive summary, and they said that on March 3rd, 2022, the Moscow Mechanism of the Human Dimension for the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, was invoked by Ukraine, supported by 45 participating states. Consequently, a mission of 3 experts was appointed on 14th March 2022, which, according to the rules of the Moscow mechanism, was to complete its work within 3 weeks and therefore delivered its report to Ukraine as the inviting state on the 5th of April 2022. So this has now been released to the public. We now know what's happening, and this is the table of contents. I mean, we're talking about going right down the list. This is very, very, very similar to how the Geneva Convention is outlined. If you guys remember from when we showed this, it's broken down to parts, sections, articles, the whole 9 yards here. And it goes pretty much down the Geneva Convention list of, how POWs should be treated, respect for the dead, the sick and wounded, shipwrecked. I mean, the same vocabulary used in the Geneva Convention in a lot of these cases. So, and they do hit on things such as the treatment of people, the treatment of, pro-Russian individuals by Ukrainians, the treatment of prisoners by Ukrainians. So it hits both sides of the fence, which is really good to see. That shows in a lot of ways that this isn't, this isn't just, focused on just Russia. They hit on both. And that's when you're talking about an investigation this high of a level, you want to see that. You want to see that, once again, there's no such thing as innocence, only degrees of guilt. Ukraine is guilty of conducting war crimes. No matter how pro-Ukrainian you may be, and we have that plain bias of being pro-Ukrainian, everyone is at fault in some way, shape, or form. Ukrainians are committing war crimes. It's a war. It happens. They need to be prosecuted. They need to be found accountable, and they need to move on. Russia is almost systematically doing it, at least according to this report. They can't verify it's systematic, but they can say it's likely, and that's the concerning part. Crimes against humanity, crimes against humanity encompass ethnic cleansing, genocide, at that level of thing. That systematic use of terror. State-sponsored terrorism, crimes against humanity, the Holocaust, the Rwandan genocide, fall under the crimes against humanity. That is the same realm of what's happening in Ukraine, according to the OSCE. So this is the first official report we've seen. There are other international investigations. The ICC hasn't released its findings. They will not be releasing their findings probably for a very long time. But to get a report, and it follow accords that even Russia has agreed to, considering the way they did this it's in the name, the Moscow mechanism. Like, Russia had to agree to this. Moscow is a participant in the OSCE, and that's a big deal. Because it means that Russia, as much as it wants to dispute its findings, and will likely try to do so, now that that's public information, and Russia, there's probably some guy who's reading this entire long document right now, as I'm talking in Russia right now, and going over every single line and every single detail. He's going to find a way to dispute this. It doesn't matter, because this is something that even Russia has agreed to treaty-wise. And this is an independent organization that Russia is a delegate to. So that's the important thing here. It's not something that they can easily dispute and have really any kind of weight behind in disputing it. So you jump over here into Strasbourg. This is in France, right here along the German-French border. And PACE, which is the Parliamentary Assembly for the Council of Europe, has unanimously called for the immediate release of 468 political prisoners held in captivity in Russia, including Alexei Navalny, Alexei Pishigin, and the Vladimir Kara-Murza. So all of them are political. They're all political activists. They are all Russian critics, all Putin critics, I should say. And they criticize corruption, oligarchies, etc. And all of them are essentially were found guilty under one bogus crime or another, and were hence, oh sweet, I can follow these guys. Sorry guys, the expansion of sources never stops. But they, these guys were basically found, guilty of bogus charges presented in the Russian courts, sent them to prison, and they keep being brought back into trial, and their prison sentence is extended, or they keep getting upgraded to more and more maximum security. Alexei Navalny was actually poisoned by FSB agents inside of the UK. Like, it's wild. It is absolutely wild. Exactly just how far this goes. So pretty big news. Coming from Pace. But will Russia listen? Probably not. That's just the unfortunate truth. You jump over here into Brussels, where this is the Turkish spokesperson, presidential spokesperson. So he's in Brussels ahead of the NATO summit there. And this is Ibrahim Kalin, and we got this from his official Twitter. So he retweeted TRT World, which is a news station. He retweeted it, which has the English translation for this, where he says that Western countries romanticize terror as a result, for supporting the YPG and YPJ and Kurdish forces throughout northern parts of areas of Iraq and Syria. Which, by the way, they're informally called the Iraqi and Syrian Kurdistan. But he also says that they're holding us captive. He says that they're holding us captive as a result of this. But take a look at this. So this is Ibrahim Kalin here.
So those terrorist organizations are carrying out their operations at the heart of Europe, as if they are taking those countries captive, which is not acceptable. Hopefully, those countries will realize this as well. So romanticizing terror or praising terror has nothing to do with the freedom of demonstration. Our interlocutors stated that they are getting ready to take necessary steps, but we will see which steps would be taken by those countries. But I also would like to state that we are following all those developments closely.
And yeah, so what he's saying, and this is what this is about, to give you the backstory on this, that we need a whole lot, but this is him justifying why they will veto Finland and Sweden joining NATO. This is why. So I have a lot of choice words when it comes to the way that the Kurdish people have been treated. Now, I do not believe that all of the Kurds are good people. Do not get me wrong. But I have spent some significant time with the Kurds. I've had my own run-ins, particular not so great run-ins, while we were there with the Kurds. So I do know that the situation is fragile, right? But the Kurds are essentially one of the only ethnic groups, major ethnic groups that don't have their own territory. It's very similar to how Arabs and Pashtuns are stuck together inside of Afghanistan. Except in the western part of the Middle East, you see that with the Kurds. They're spread across Iraq and Syria and Turkey. And the Kurds have been relatively oppressed for essentially their entire existence as a group, especially by the Arab and the Ottoman Turk. And so Turkey really doesn't have any fondness for them. There's a group of the Kurds called the PKK, which is a Kurdish Marxist group. They're communists. And they are indeed, to an extent, terrorists. The best way to describe the situation with the PKK and the Kurds is the Middle Eastern version of the Troubles in Northern Ireland between the IRA and the British. That's probably the best way to describe it for anyone that kind of understands history. Where the IRA were fighting the British and there was car bombings and all of that. Kurdish Marxist groups, the PKK did the same thing. You have other groups known as the YPG and YPJ, YPG being the men, YPJ being the females, and they together formed the YPK. They are another socialist group, but they're democratic socialists, and they form the major parts of the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces inside of Syria, which is where U.S. coalition forces are supporting them. PKK also operates alongside them. Very kind of hard to distinguish the two of them, but they do wear separate patches. They maintain separate identification. They do not wear, the PKK does not wear YPJ patches or anything. They wear their own. But that is the situation that they fight together. They're Kurds. And this is the same thing you're seeing, because it turns out not just in the parts of Iraq here, up in Dahak, where, by the way, there are Kurds, or there are Turks that are being killed. They actually posted on their government Twitter, every single person who's a martyr who's killed in the operation there. But not only are they fighting the PKK, but they're also fighting the Peshmerga there as well, which are the Iraqi Kurdish militia, because this is Iraqi Kurdistan within this region. So that's why they extended the security zone back in 2019 and 2020, and why the U.S. had to pull out of a lot of areas here. Is because two NATO countries fighting each other wouldn't be a good thing, despite the threats that you hear, otherwise sometimes. But that's kind of the situation. That's why it's frustrating to me, because it's essentially, sometime in some cases there has been questions of whether or not Turkey has been conducting ethnic cleansing. It's not widespread enough. I think that can be a consideration, but it is a terrible situation nonetheless, that I can't support personally. Now, others may have very differing opinions, and I have had a lot of discussions with that before, with some individuals, but that's just a difference in opinion, just based off of my personal experiences. But that kind of boils it down. Basically, it's the troubles of Turkey, and that spills over. And that actually does bring us down into the Middle East. And with that, we actually jump over here into Baghdad, where protesters are actually taking to the streets here in Diyala Governorate. They're blocking a major roadway there, the Bakuba Makadidia. I'm sorry, I may have spent time there, but I still cannot pronounce. I barely speak English, guys. But this is because there's a lack of water. We know there's a major drought ongoing in Iraq. And a lack of electricity, and the security situation in Iraq just is not good. There's a lot of militias. There's Khatib Hezbollah. There's the peace brigades. There's all sorts of different militias in here. You have the Iraqi army. You have the Golden Lions division, which is basically your special forces that were trained by Western forces. You have the Kurds. You have the Islamic State. You have the IRGC and the Quds Force, and all of that all mixed in here. So that's the situation. The situation just isn't good. And the Islamic State is a very big issue within Iraq. So you can see they're blocking the roads. And there's a lot of people that are very upset with the government in Iraq. We saw major protests a few years ago in Nasiriyah over the same thing. And I think that's kind of where we may be headed, because the already kind of fragile political and security situation inside the country, the drought and now famine that's going to be going on in Iraq as a result of global climate change is going to be exacerbating the problem even further. So jump down here into the Persian Gulf. The U.S. released video footage of the incident between a U.S. naval warship and an Iranian speedboat sailing past it in the Strait of Hormuz. This happened a couple days ago. We reported on it yesterday, covering the last 48 hours of news. So we'll actually be able to take a look at exactly what happened. So, it's a swift boat, right? It's a swift boat versus like two frigates. What's it going to do? Well, you have to look at what's happened in the past of swift boats detonating. They're being loaded with C4, detonating. Most of these swift boats are operated by the IRGC, which is actually considered it's the Iranian Republican Guard Corps. They're considered actually a terrorist organization according to the United States. But the tensions are ramping up, especially over the fact that they have been attacking shipping inside of the Strait of Hormuz in the Persian Gulf. And why is this important? Well, actually, not that anyone's invoking it, right? Obviously, we're not at war with Iran, but actually getting so close to American warship is actually considered an act of war. You get so many warnings ahead of time when you're getting so close to an American warship. Actually, getting this close and this dangerously close, especially with a relatively hostile nation that has opened fired on American installations before. If you remember 2020, when they fired theater ballistic missiles into Al Assad Air Base, or Erbil, Iraq. So that's the situation. It's just not good. Getting within so close to an American warship is considered an act of war, and no one's invoking it because no one really wants a war. But that is the possibility. And if something were to happen, the U.S. would have a very, very swift response to it. That's for sure. And that also comes right as Iran has a meeting with Russia here in Tehran. Lavrov, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs for Russia and one of Putin's main inner circle members, met with the president of Iran today. Tomorrow he will be meeting with the foreign minister. We actually have a video of that. So obviously they're just having a meeting, the normal kind of political affairs thing. Now, keep in mind the president of Iran is not the same as the supreme leader of Iran. There are two people. The supreme leader of Iran is called the Ayatollah, for those that don't know. So there is actually a guy above him, but Iran is a theocracy. It is a caliphate, actually. So as we move over here into Afghanistan, over in eastern Afghanistan and western Pakistan, there is a 6.1 registered earthquake 46 kilometers south of the city of Khost, really early this morning. And right now the death toll is standing at roughly 1,500 people, with an additional 1,500 people reportedly being injured. A very massive amount of damage. Homes just gone and leveled. The Afghan Ministry of Defense stated that they had teams of helicopters and medical support going out there with whatever capacity they had. The World Health Organization says its teams were also on the ground in response to it. And the Deputy Minister of State for Disaster Management, Malawi, Sharafuddin Muslim, said that on Wednesday that the Islamic Emirate will pay 100,000 AFN, or $1,116.19, to the families of those who were killed in the earthquake. For 50,000, or $558.10, will be paid to the families of those who were injured. So they're providing compensation to them if they are able to. But that's a pretty big situation ongoing there. I mean, a massive amount of destruction. These buildings, they're made out of mud brick and what little wood is available, in a lot of these regions. I mean, luckily they're in a more mountainous region in the tribals. They have a lot more access to natural resources like this, but these have stood for generations. And they're not made to withstand stuff like this. They're not modern infrastructure. They're just very simple buildings that are not meant to withstand this kind of an event. And down here in Sri Lanka, the economy of Sri Lanka has officially collapsed. The Prime Minister actually said that the country's economy has collapsed. And with that, Sri Lanka has called China, India, and Japan, and is looking for a donor conference to drum up some foreign assistance, and present an interim budget in August. So they're trying to figure this out. They're trying to find a way. They can't buy anything. They can't buy imports of fuel. They have no way of refining their own. They can't make diesel for their generators. They can't make oil. They can't make any of this. They don't have the foreign exchange currency to do it. They're running out of fuel. They're running out of food. They're running out of medication. There are protesters. Everyone would probably love to drag the president out of office right now, and I sure do some very unsensible things to him, considering he just won't resign. His brother resigned and left the city of Colombo as soon as physically possible. So that's the situation. They're currently wanting to set up a fund. They're trying to find a way to bring some economic stability. And we've seen India and other nations have really good faith efforts of attempting to do this, and sending this aid to them, but it's run out. So Sri Lanka, which suspended payment on the $12 billion foreign debt in April, is seeking around $3 billion from the IMF. So pretty substantial. We're getting this from Reuters, so if you guys would like to take a look at more in depth, probably learn a little bit more about the ongoing crisis in Sri Lanka that's been building for some time now, I highly recommend going and checking that out and reading up a little bit more on the situation. I actually don't have anything in Africa today. It's been a little bit quiet, but we do have some stuff over here in Central America when we jump over here to El Salvador, because the state of emergency has been extended yet again. It's the third time. They're currently cracking down on gangs in the country. It's been 3 months since that they did this, and security forces have actually arrested more than 41,300 people, including 1,190 minors who allegedly belonging to or collaborating with gangs. 70% currently support the government's measures against these gangs. So that's pretty big. It had a pretty overwhelming vote for it. But this was originally meant to be only a 30-day measure in March. So that's pretty big. But also getting this from Reuters, so if you guys want to check that out a little bit more, read a little bit more in depth on it, you are more than welcome to. A plane actually caught fire yesterday in Miami along with the passengers on board. Red Air aircraft caught fire while landing at Miami International Airport on June the 21st. Footage of the scene has just now started to really emerge. There are 126 passengers on board. 3 of them received minor injuries and were hospitalized. You can take a look. From my understanding of reading up on the situation, the forward landing gear did not actually lock in place and collapsed upon landing, which forced them to conduct essentially a belly landing onto the tarmac, and the engine ended up flaming out there. So a little bit of a rough landing, but any landing you walk away from is considered a good one. Up here in Washington, D.C., right from the White House, we have the Department of Defense spokesman, John Kirby, former Admiral John Kirby of the U.S. Navy. And he talks about Russia weaponizing famine, and talks about how what the U.S. is trying to do in order to get grain out of Ukraine and onto the global market. So let's go ahead and take a listen here.
President Putin is, no kidding, weaponizing food. Let's just call it what it is. He's weaponizing food. He's got an essential blockade there in the Black Sea so that nothing can leave by sea, and that's, of course, how Ukraine has historically gotten its grain to markets. And so the president's working with leaders around the world to see if there's other overland ways we can do that. And he's exploring a range of options. He's keeping an open mind about how that would look. And there's lots of other of our partners, particularly in Europe, who also want to see that done. So there's a lot of work being done here. But as I said, I think the other day, last week, we know time is not on our side. I mean, this grain is a perishable commodity, so we want to get it out as fast as we can.
So obviously, he picks his words very carefully, and I guess as the one of the leading figures in the Department of Defense, you probably need to operational security and all that fun stuff. But he's very good with how he puts things and really puts it to the people, puts it out to the reporters, and how he talks about things. He doesn't necessarily answer any of a lot of the questions that a lot of people really want the answers to. but he is very, very good about how he releases information, and it kind of explains what's happening, even within his own limitations there, to make sure that things that need to stay private are private, and things that, are, of security importance, or, stay secure, but within those boundaries. I found he's a pretty good spokesperson to really explain that to me and everyone else in the world. And on our final point here, unfortunately, we don't have anything that we can really consider good news today. But as I was talking about earlier, the situation in Iraq is going to be exacerbated by drought and famine. And the UN actually added Iraq to the part of the top 5 countries affected by climate change. Then it's saying that this is mostly due to the sharp decrease in the amount of land suitable for agriculture and drinking water. It is expected that everything continues the same way, that in 2040, all major reservoirs in Iraq will dry up, including the rivers of Djila and Furat, which are the Tigris and the Euphrates. The Tigris and Euphrates River is where civilization began. As human beings, the Tigris River, Baghdad, really, is where humanity's civilization really truly began in its earnest, and that is going to be gone. It's going to be drying up. So while our ancestors may have gotten to see the beginning of civilization in what we know it now, we may very well within our lifetime see the unfortunate end of it, all due to, at this point, almost most things point to almost irreversible climate change globally. And while that is a little bit of a sad note to end up on, it does bring it into reality as to what our project here is to do. Once again, we're never going to be having super chats on this channel. We're never going to be pushing merch or anything like that. That's not what we're interested in. I have a full-time job, and everyone here volunteers their time to be doing this every day. We have a wonderful staff team. The researchers are amazing. I really just lend my voice to this project. But this is a community-led project. This is led by you. And this only works with your support of not just the channel, but most importantly, the organizations in the description. When I say that what we're aiming to do is to impact the very same things that we report on, I truly do mean that. Every day we talk about Ukraine, and we have tons of stuff in Ukraine for Ukraine, whether you want to support the war effort, the effort to rebuild the country after the war is over, or you want to help humanitarian efforts. All of that is in the description. We constantly are asking for support and helping us try and find more places to donate to, so we can vet them and make sure the money actually gets to where it needs to go. That way you are safe and protected, and that way you're not dealing with scammers. And we also have the FBI's webpage on internet fraud for those that want to check it out. It's on our Discord. We have it under links there. And so, we want to help the very same people we report on every single day. And you guys make that possible. You guys have been awesome so far. And I want to be able to put a fundraiser on every single stream that we do, officially, not just in the description, but on the stream itself. And so you guys are the big driving force behind that. So if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. But if you can't give anything at all, then give us a like and subscribe, because that's how we get to that point. And tell your friends about us. Let them know. If you enjoy the way that we do the news and the way that we go through and try to describe things and help answer questions, then let your friends know, and help us grow our community. Your guys' support has been awesome so far. I cannot thank you enough, and I really cannot thank you enough for supporting the organizations in the description, because there are millions of people that need our help right now throughout the world and will continue to need our help. And I don't think of any better project to support than this one. So I really appreciate it. I hope that you guys have a great night. I hope that you guys have enjoyed the news tonight. I know there wasn't a fun story there at the end like there normally is, or something interesting, but unfortunately not all of the news is that way. And we have to understand that. And we try to find something good, but it just doesn't always happen. So please let us know if you have any other organizations. We would love to get the vetting process started, especially for regions that we don't currently have, to places like Brazil and places like South Africa, more places for Ethiopia and Somalia. If you can find a way to get stuff into Iraq, that would be great. A really, solid way to get stuff into Iraq, not something that, something we can verify. I would really appreciate that. We would all love it. So please jump on our Discord and let us know. You can let any of the staff members know, and we'll get that process going for you. We're vetting several right now to hopefully get out to you guys here soon. So, but with that, please be safe. There's a lot of bad stuff going on. So I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe. And if not, I really hope you find that safety and security in the very near future, regardless of what you're going through. And I really hope to see you guys back tomorrow night. And hopefully you brought some friends with you too. But if not, that's fine. I just really hope to see you guys back tomorrow night. I hope you guys enjoy and continue to enjoy. Hit me up on the Discord. Pick my brain a little bit if you guys want to. And have a great night, guys. My name is Paul from the New News, and I will see you guys once again tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central. Have a wonderful night, everyone.